This is a continuation of our reading of John Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion. Chapter 5. The Knowledge of God Conspicuous in the Creation and Continual Government of the World. This chapter consists of two parts. First, the former, which occupies the first 10 sections, divides all the works of God into two great classes and elucidates the knowledge of God as displayed in each class. The one class is treated of in the first 6, and the other in the 4 following sections. Secondly, the latter part of the chapter shows that, in consequence of the extreme stupidity of men, those manifestations of God, however perspicuous, lead to no useful result. This latter part, which commences at the 11th section, is continued to the end of the chapter. Sections. 1. The invisible and incomprehensible essence of God, to a certain extent made visible in his works. Number 2. This declared by the first class of works, that is, the admirable motions of the heavens and the earth, the symmetry of the human body, and the connection of its parts, in short, the various objects which are presented to every eye. Number 3. This more especially manifested in the structure of the human body. Number 4. The shameful ingratitude of disregarding God, who, in such a variety of ways, is manifested within us. The still more shameful ingratitude of contemplating the endowments of the soul without ascending to Him who gave them. No objection can be founded on any supposed organism in the soul. Number 5. The powers and actions of the soul, a proof of its separate existence from the body, proofs of the soul's immortality, objection that the whole world is quickened by one soul, reply to the objection, its impiety. Number 6. Conclusion from what has been said, that is, that the omnipotence, eternity, and goodness of God may be learned from the first class of works. For example, those which are in accordance with the ordinary course of nature. Number 7. The second class of works, that is, those above the ordinary course of nature, afford clear evidence of the perfections of God, especially His goodness, justice, and mercy. Number 8. Also His providence, power, and wisdom. Number 9. Proofs and illustrations of the divine majesty, the use of them, that is, the acquisition of divine knowledge in combination with true piety. Number 10. The tendency of the knowledge of God to inspire the righteous with the hope of future life, and remind the wicked of the punishments reserved for them. Its tendency, moreover, to keep alive in the hearts of the righteous a sense of the divine goodness. Number 11. The second part of the chapter, which describes the stupidity both of learned and unlearned in ascribing the whole order of things and the admirable arrangements of divine providence to fortune. Number 12. Hence polytheism, with all its abominations and the endless and irreconcilable opinions of the philosophers concerning God. Number 13. All guilty of revolt from God, corrupting pure religion, either by following general custom or the impious consent of antiquity. Number 14. Though irradiation by the wondrous glories of creation, we cease not to follow our own ways. Number 15. Our conduct altogether inexcusable, the dullness of perception being attributable to ourselves, while we are fully reminded of the true path, both by the structure and the government of the world. Number 1. Since the perfection of blessedness consists in the knowledge of God, He has been pleased, in order that none might be excluded from the means of obtaining felicity, not only to deposit in our minds that seed of religion of which we have already spoken, but so to manifest His perfections in the whole structure of the universe, and daily place Himself in our view, that we cannot open our eyes without being compelled to behold Him. His essence, indeed, is incomprehensible, utterly transcending all human thought. But on each of His works His glory is engraven, in characters so bright, so distinct, and so illustrious, that none, however dull and illiterate, can plead ignorance as their excuse. Hence, with perfect truth, the psalmist exclaims, quote, He covereth Himself with light as with a garment, unquote, Psalm 104, verse 2. As if he had said that God for the first time was arrayed in visible attire when, in the creation of the world, He displayed those glorious banners on which, to whatever side we turn, we behold His perfections visibly portrayed. In the same place, the psalmist aptly compares the expanded heavens to His royal tent, and says, quote, He layeth the beams of His chambers in the waters, maketh the clouds His chariot, and walketh upon the wings of the wind. Sending forth the winds and lightnings as His swift messengers. And because the glory of His power and wisdom is more refulgent in the firmament, it is frequently designated as His palace. And first, wherever you turn your eyes, there is no portion of the world, however minute, that does not exhibit at least some sparks of beauty, while it is impossible to contemplate the vast and beautiful fabric as it extends around without being overwhelmed by the immense weight of glory. Hence the author of the Epistle to the Hebrews elegantly describes the visible worlds as images of the invisible in Hebrews 11, verse 3. The elegant structure of the world serving us as a kind of mirror in which we may behold God, though otherwise invisible. For the same reason, the psalmist attributes language to celestial objects, a language which all nations understand, Psalm 19, verse 1, the manifestation of the Godhead being too clear to escape the notice of any people, however obtuse. The Apostle Paul, stating this still more clearly, says, quote, "That which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead," unquote. Romans 1, verse 20. Number 2. In attestation of his wondrous wisdom, both the heavens and the earth present us with innumerable proofs, not only those more recondite proofs, which astronomy, medicine, and all the natural sciences are designed to illustrate, but proofs which force themselves on the notice of the most illiterate peasant, who cannot open his eyes without beholding them. It is true, indeed, that those who are more or less intimately acquainted with those liberal studies are thereby assisted and enabled to obtain a deeper insight into the secret workings of divine wisdom. No man, however, though he be ignorant of these, is incapacitated for discerning such proofs of creative wisdom as may well cause him to break forth in admiration to the Creator. To investigate the motions of the heavenly bodies, to determine their positions, measure their distances, and ascertain their properties, demands skill and a more careful examination. And where these are so employed, as the providence of God is thereby more fully unfolded, so it is reasonable to suppose that the mind takes a loftier flight and obtains brighter views of his glory. Still, none who have the use of their eyes can be ignorant of the divine skill manifested so conspicuously in the endless variety, yet distinct and well-ordered array of the heavenly host. And therefore it is plain that the Lord has furnished every man with abundant proofs of his wisdom. The same is true in regard to the structure of the human frame. To determine the connection of its parts, its symmetry and beauty, with the skill of a Galen, requires singular acuteness, and yet all men acknowledge that the human body bears on its face such proofs of ingenious contrivance as are sufficient to proclaim the admirable wisdom of its Maker. Number 3. Hence certain of the philosophers have not improperly called man a microcosm, miniature world, as being a rare specimen of divine power, wisdom, and goodness, and containing within himself wonders sufficient to occupy our minds if we are willing so to employ them. Paul, accordingly, after reminding the Athenians that they, quote, might feel after God and find him, unquote, immediately adds that, quote, he is not far from every one of us, unquote, Acts 17, verse 27. Every man having within himself undoubted evidence of the heavenly grace by which he lives and moves and has his being. But if, in order to apprehend God, it is unnecessary to go farther than ourselves, what excuse can there be for the sloth of any man who will not take the trouble of descending into himself that he may find him? For the same reason, too, David, after briefly celebrating the wonderful name and glory of God as everywhere displayed, immediately exclaims, quote, what is man, that thou art mindful of him, unquote. And again, quote, out of the mouths of babes and sucklings thou hast ordained strength, unquote. Psalm 8, verse 2, as well as verse 4. Thus he declares not only that the human race are a bright mirror of the Creator's works, but that infants hanging on their mothers' breasts have tongues eloquent enough to proclaim his glory without the aid of their orators. Accordingly, he hesitates not to bring them forward as fully instructed to refute the madness of those who from devilish pride would fain extinguish the name of God. Hence, too, the passage which Paul quotes from Aratus, quote, we are his offspring, unquote, in Acts 17, verse 28, the excellent gifts which he has endowed us, attesting that he is our Father. In the same way also, from natural instinct, and, as it were, at the dictation of experience, heathen poets call him the father of men. No one, indeed, will voluntarily and willingly devote himself to the service of God unless he has previously tasted his paternal love, and been thereby allured to love and reverence him. Number 4. But herein appears the shameful ingratitude of men, though they have in their own persons a factory where innumerable operations of God are carried on, and a magazine stored with treasures of inestimable value. Instead of bursting forth in his praise as they are bound to do, they, on the contrary, are more inflated and swelled with pride. They feel how wonderfully God is working in them, and their own experiences tell them of the vast variety of gifts which they owe to his liberality. Whether they will or not, they cannot but know that these are proofs of his Godhead, and yet they inwardly suppress them. They have no occasion to go farther than themselves, provided they do not, by appropriating as their own that which has been given them from heaven, put out the light intended to exhibit God clearly to their minds. At this day, however, the earth sustains on her bosom many monster minds which are not afraid to employ the seed of deity deposited in human nature as a means of suppressing the name of God. Can anything be more detestable than this madness in man, who, finding God 100 times both in his body and his soul, makes his excellence in this respect a pretext for denying that there is a God? He will not say that chance has made him differ from the brutes that perish, but substituting nature as the architect of the universe, he suppresses the name of God. The swift motions of the soul, its noble faculties and rare endowments, bespeak the agency of God in a manner which would make the suppression of it impossible. Did not the Epicureans, like so many Cyclops, use it as a vantage ground from which to wage more audacious war with God? Are so many treasures of heavenly wisdom employed in the guidance of such a worm as man, and shall the whole universe be denied the same privilege? To hold that there are organs in the soul corresponding to each of its faculties is so far from obscuring the glory of God that it rather illustrates it. Let Epicurus tell us what concourse of atoms, cooking meat and drink, can form one portion into refuse and another portion into blood, and make all the members separately perform their office as carefully as if they were so many souls, acting with common consent in the superintendence of one body.